Hello, welcome to Reaseheath College. We're in the construction department today, and I'm Andrew Gould, I'm the head of construction. And this video is brought in partnership with the charity Building Heroes, which we help run a property maintenance course for military veterans. So today I'm going to go over some of the tools and equipment that you're going to need to repair a damaged brick, to take out a brick, and then we'll make it good as well and put a new brick in there. But first of all, I want to cover some of the things that you're going to need, some of the tools, some of the PPE. So obviously on any building site you'd be wearing steel toe cap boots anyway. You don't want anything dropping on your feet. Some building sites obviously will also insist on high vis and hard hats, which I'm already wearing. So if I'm going to be using any power tools of any description and there's a risk of flying debris, then I'm going to need my safety goggles. So these are safety glasses, they're shatter resistant. Obviously you can wear the full face goggles. They tend to get steamed up a little bit, so they can potentially be a bit of a hazard. Safety glasses are a really good alternative. Also obviously we're going to need a dust mask because there's going to be a lot of dust about, and we need to protect ourselves. Silica dust, which is the dust that's generated from concrete, brick, mortar, is one of the biggest killers in the construction industry at the moment. So it's really important that we protect ourselves. So wearing the PPE is absolutely 100% critical. So you've got to make sure you've got the right dust mask and they fit on the face correctly. It's not just a case of putting them on. You need to make sure you pinch the top so it goes around the nose and protects yourself as best as you possibly can. Now I've also got a pair of gloves, and you might be thinking, why on earth do I need to wear a pair of gloves? And that's because once we finish with the drilling, we're going to be using a hammer and a chisel. Now if your hand-eye coordination isn't as good as it could be, I will guarantee that you'll find yourself hitting your thumbs, hitting your hand and missing the top of the chisel. Wearing the gloves will just give that extra layer of protection, so hopefully you won't get too many cuts and bruises. They're only thin, but they do offer some protection, so really important. Next we're going to show you the lump hammer. This is a 3-pound lump hammer, so it's not too heavy. You can get some that are a lot heavier, but if you're wielding one of these all day, you'll end up with arms like Arnold Schwarzenegger. So it's really important that you get one that's comfortable for you, the right weight for you to use. So a 3-pounder is a really good one to start. The next chisel, the next tool we're going to need is a chisel called a plug-in chisel. Okay, and I'll come a little bit closer. So basically this is a chisel that goes into the joint of the brick and clean it out. So as you can see, it's got a lovely flat blade, so that means it slides into the 10mm joint and you can clear the joint out free from debris, and it's not going to damage the brickwork. Okay, now some people may try and use the bolster because it's a little bit quicker, because it's got a nice long blade, so you're going to get more of the joint out. The problem with using a bolster is, as you can see down there, it gets thicker towards the bottom. So if you drive that into the joint of the brickwork, where it gets thicker at the heel, it's going to jam in the brickwork and it's going to break and spalch the bricks that you hopefully are going to stay in. So if you damage the brick, you then end up taking another brick out. So you just keep going on forever. So it's really important that you use the right tools, and this isn't one of them. Okay, so now I'm going to be using a method called stitch drilling. And basically what that means is I'm going to drill a series of holes all the way around the joint of the brick I want to take out. Now that's because it creates less dust, most importantly. It is a bit longer, but what you'll find is if you try use an angle grinder or a disc cutter to cut the joint, it doesn't go all the way in because the blade isn't deep enough to go in the 4-inch of the brickwork. So you'll find yourself whizzing around with an angle grinder really quickly, and then bashing and bashing and bashing forever, and potentially you're going to break more bricks. So the stitch drill, yes, it's a little bit more long-winded, but it is the preferred method, certainly with most bricklayers. So for the stitch drilling, I'm going to need a power drill, which I've got here. I'm going to need a 7mm drill bit. It's important that you choose the diameter of the drill bit that's smaller than the joint that you want to take out, because again, if it's too wide, it's going to damage the brickwork, which you don't want to do. Now, as you can see here, I've got a handle on the side of the drill. That's really important that it's in position, because you need to hold the drill like that. Okay, and that's really important. This isn't here for decorative purposes. This is here because when you're drilling, If I was holding the drill incorrectly like that, because this casing is going to get hot, so potentially going to burn my hand. This is a moving part, and if I'm not careful, my hand's going to slip and I'm going to burn and cause an abrasion on my hand. So holding it there whilst really comfortable ain't the way to do it. But if you were to do that and the brickwork snagged, the drill is going to flick round and that's going to hit you on the underside of the chin, and you're going to think you've done 10 rounds with Mike Tyson. So it's absolutely vital that you hold the drill correctly, because then if it did kick, you've got both hands on there to stop any twist. Vitally important. Now, before using any drill or any tool, electrical equipment, any equipment of any sort, to be fair, even hand tools, you've got to check it. So I'm looking over the body of the drill to make sure there's no cracks, there's no missing parts, everything looks in order, battery's working, it's secure, so I'm happy that that's okay. Now again, I'm using a cordless drill because I just find it a lot easier. From a health and safety point of view, you've got no trailing cables, so again there's less trip hazards, you can be moved about, it's a lot more portable obviously. So I prefer those. Now if you were using a corded drill like I've got here, then again the same checks on the body of the drill are required, but most importantly, if you're using a corded cable, then you've got to check the cable. So you start with the plug. I'm checking the pins of the plug to make sure that they're all okay, they're not loose, they're not bent. I'm checking the casing of the plug, make sure there's no cracks or splits in that. And then I'm going to go down the entire length of the cable, checking that there's no cuts or splits in the cable. Because if there is, and there's potentially any bare wires, then you're putting yourself at risk of an electric shock. So it's absolutely vital that you complete this test accurately, because you don't know, one, who's had the drill before and have they been as careful as you, or you might have stored it incorrectly in the back of the van or in your tool shed and it's got damaged while it was in storage. So really important that you take them checks every time that you use a drill. So that's okay. If you pick a cable up and it's got insulation tape round, do not use it. That means that somebody has made a bodged repair on a drill and potentially you could still get an electric shock. So if there's anything wrong with the drill, you take it to the site manager, you report it, you do not use it, you put it out of harm's way so nobody else can use it. And that's all the tools and equipment that we need. So I've got a brick here that's eroded and the face has dropped off. We call that spalching, where the brick's got that wet over the period of years and the face has just fallen off the brick, so a little bit unsightly, so we're going to take that out. So I mentioned in the previous video about stitch drilling, so in a minute I'm going to get the drill and all I'm going to do, I'm going to go around the entire perimeter of the brick, so I'm trying to remove all the joints around the brick. Now I'll get you a close-up shot in a moment once I've done the stitch drilling all the way around. But first of all I'm going to put my PPE on. The first thing I'm going to do is, obviously I have to wear these ID badges. Now I'm going to create probably some huge gasps from other members of staff around the campus, but I'm going to take that off. I don't want that hanging around, or a necklace for instance, or a chain, whilst I'm using a drill, because if it gets caught in the drill it's going to get tangled up and I could end up throttling myself. So we're going to take my ID badge off. You can hear the gasps all around, and I'm going to put on my safety glasses. I'm going to take my hat off for 2 seconds. I'm just pinching the top of the dust mask so it goes around my nose. So I'll do the drilling now, and then I'll give you a close-up of exactly how to go. Hopefully you'll be able to see how I'm holding the drill correctly and how it's done. Okay, so all I've done there is I've gone round the brick using the drill bit to take as much of the mortar joint out as possible. Again, that's called stitch drilling. And I'll bring the camera a little bit closer now so you can see what the next steps are. Okay, so you can see there I've done a series of holes around that brick. Probably do a few more if you wanted to. The more the better, because the more of the mortar joint you take out, the better. So what I'm going to do now, I've gone in at a 90-degree angle, so I've gone straight in 90 degrees with the drill bit. So that's created a hole through the entire brick. So what I'm going to do now is, where I've done the holes, I'm going to drill on a 45-degree angle, so I'll take even more of the drill, but the joint out. So that's going to go round at a 45-degree angle, and I'm going to do that all the way around again, and then that's going to make sure that I take as much of the drill bit out and the mortar joint out as possible. What's really critical here is don't tend to use the drill bit as a chisel to waggle it about, because what you'll end up with about 13 drill bits stuck in your mortar bed and you can't get them out. So it's really important that you keep the drill steady, horizontal, and go through the mortar joint as best you can. Okay, so now I'm going to go around the brick again, going in at a 45-degree angle like I showed you before, just to clear even more of the mortar joint out. Okay, so now you can see that I've gone around the brick quite a few times now, and I've started to get as much of the joint out, and that's all been used by the drill in the drill bit, so pretty much no manual labour on that, so it's all been done by the drill, carefully not allowing the drill bit to break. It's really important that you don't bend that drill. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to get the plug-in chisel, and I'm going to show you how we use the plug-in chisel to get the remainder of the joint out, and then that brick will just pop out. It'll still be whole, and there's a possibility with these bricks, because these are an old Cheshire common brick, there's a possibility that the reverse side of that is still going to be good and intact, and because I haven't bolted the brick out and smashed it to smithereens, there's a possibility I could just flip that round and use the other side, because then it'll match the existing brickwork. But I have got some Cheshire Commons just in case I need to replace it completely. But I'll set up and get you the plug-in chisel on the go so you can see that. Okay, so I've still got my goggles on, I've got my gloves, because again, this is where if I miss and hit my hand, it's still going to hurt, but hopefully it's not going to cut. So you use the plug-in chisel, and you can see that the plug-in chisel's got this slanted edge. So the point goes in first, and as I hit it, the chisel will want to slide that way, and it'll carve more of the mortar joint out as you go. So again, long-winded process, but if you're going to retrieve that brick intact, this is what you need to use. So just keep taking a little bit each time. Don't try to take too much, because you'll just get the chisel stuck. So again, it's a little piece at a time, until you've got the joint completely out. There's a little bit there that's quite tough, so you might want to get the drill bit out again and just give it another going over with the drill if you've missed a little bit. But I'll persevere. You can see it's again, this is a little bit tougher on your arms, so you might want to do this in stages if you're not used to swinging a hammer this long, because it will make your arms ache after a while if you're completely new to this, or if you're not a bricklayer. And you just carry on all the way around there, getting out again. I'll come back to the video once I've got it free. So I've gone all the way around there, all the bottom is pretty much out, and also the two perps either side, those are the vertical joints. As long as those are clear, this top, obviously gravity should take over and that should drop out. So I'm getting the bolster, which I said don't use for clearing the joints. But what this will do, this will break the mortar joint and hopefully the brick will drop. But you've just got to be careful you don't send the bolster in too deep, because again the heel where it gets thicker will break this brick that we want to leave in. So you've got to be a bit careful. Okay, so the brick's a little bit loose now, so I can get the bolster. And all I'm doing is just giving that a little bit of a waggle, and any of the loose mortar that are around will come out, and out comes the brick. And somebody's already flipped that round. As you can see, it's as bad on the back as it is on the front, so I will have to replace that brick entirely. But what you should see in here now is all the access mortar that we drilled out. That's got to be completely clear. So you've got to get your bolster now, or a smaller tonging chisel, which is half the thickness. And just make sure you clear that all out. The other thing that's important before we move on to mixing and repairing and replacing the brick, it's got to be completely dust free. If you leave any dust in there and try and replace a brick, the mortar is going to stick to the dust and not the brick, so it'll never adhere and never go off, and it'll just fall out. So it's important that I get a soft brush and I clear all this out. I'll then dampen it down just to make sure that all the dust particles are gone, but I'll clear that out now. And then we can move on to the replacing part. So it's just a matter of getting the chisel in there and making sure that everything is free and out, because if you leave anything in there, what you're going to find is when you try to put your brick in is it'll get stuck and it won't fit. So you've got to make sure that this is clear. Okay, so I'll just keep bashing that for a little bit until I'm happy that I've got enough out. There we go, it's all falling out now. It's quite loose on the back, so there's less work. So that's all out, and I've got some water here in a watering can. So instead of brushing it, I'm just going to put the water in there, and you can see all the dust coming out, and we can wash that down. Okay, so that's sort of ready for mixing and putting the brick back in. So now we're going to be talking about mixing the mortar and replacing that brick and making it look like it always existed. So some of the things we're going to need a bit of water, you need some sand and cement. We've also got some mortar plasticizer, so I'll just come a little bit closer. So this is an additive, a chemical that we use to make the mortar more workable. A lot of people will use fairy liquid, but you should not use fairy liquid. Okay, what this actually does is put loads of little air bubbles around each grain of sand that makes the mortar and the compo, what we tend to call it, more workable and easier to use. If you use fairy liquid or Happy Shopper or other brands are available, you can't control the amount of air bubbles that's putting into the mix. So what happens is you'll use it, and if you were to break that mortar joint open a few days later, it would look like a block of aero. It would just be full of air bubbles, and in time that mortar would degrade and crumble, and it's just not structurally sound. So fairy liquid detergents, although they work, is a big no-no. You use the right stuff, and you read the instructions on the back to make sure you use the right quantities. This is concentrated, so 5 millilitres does a whole bag of cement. Obviously I'm not going to be using a whole bag of cement, so I'm going to have to gauge how much I use. So obviously I'm a bit used to this, so that's okay, but you really need to read the instructions. It's also an irritant, so you've got to be really careful not to get it on your hands, and certainly not in your eyes. The Kosh data sheets by Seeker are on the website, so you can read those first to make sure that you fully understand what to do if it was to go wrong. If you use it correctly, nothing's going to wrong, but obviously accidents do happen. So that's the plasticizer. So I've got my empty bucket, and I'm going to mix my compo now, or the mortar. Let's use the correct terminology, the mortar. So the mortar comes in different mixes. So for a facing brick like this, normally it would be 6 parts sand to 1 cement. We would call that 6 and 1. So these ratios, and this is where maths comes into the equation in bricklaying, the ratios are vitally important, because I'm going to measure a small quantity of mortar to use for lay 1 brick. So I'm going to be using a measuring jug, and I'm going to measure 6 sand and 1 cement. But if I was laying 500 bricks or doing a big mix, then I would have to do multiples of 6 and 1. So it could be 12 and 2, 18 and 3, so on and so forth. So the multiplication and understanding how ratios work is vitally important. So as I said, I'm using a measuring jug, and it's vitally important that you measure the quantity of each ingredient that you're putting in, because when it dries, it will dry a different shade if you get the mix wrong. So you've got to get it right. So measuring it with a bucket or a container is the only way to do it correctly. When I was a lad, it used to be called a gauge box, but that's going back a long time. You probably won't see gauge boxes anywhere on building sites now. Your good old bucket has replaced that. So I've got my sand there, so I've scraped it off the top. That's a full 1. So I'm going to put them in there, and I'm only laying 1 brick, so I'm going to put 3 in there, and then using the measure on the jug, it's only half full of cement, so it's 3 and a half, still 6 and 1. The ratio remains the same, as Led Zeppelin once said, I think. Oh no, that song remains the same. So I've got the contents in the bucket. I've now got my gauging trowel, which is a slightly different trowel with a rounded edge, and that's just easier to mix in the bucket because I'm going to be mixing by hand. So first of all, I'm just mixing the sand and cement together. There's no water in here yet. I just want the sand and cement to be mixed evenly throughout the consistency. It's no different than making pastry for those of you in the food department. Okay, so I'm happy that that's okay. Just going to put a small amount of the mortar plasticizer in there, and now this is the tricky bit. Okay, I'm going to add just a small amount of water. You don't want to add too much water, okay, because what will happen is you'll be tempted to put more water in to make it quicker to mix. The more water you put into your mix, when you try come and lay it, the water will come out of the joint, will come out of the mortar if you don't mix it correctly. And the best bricklayer in the world, or Stoke-on-Trent for that matter, won't be able to lay bricks with bad mortar. So always add a small amount of water at a time, mix it round, and then just add small increments until you get the right consistency. And I'll show you that consistency once again. So all I'm doing is turning it over and over and over. The more times you fold it, the more times the plasticizer is going to be putting the air bubbles into the mortar and making it easier to use. Now it is hard work, and like I say, you'll be tempted because you're getting out of breath and panting a bit like a dog that pants a lot, that you'll want to put more water in to make it quicker. But you've got to resist that temptation and just keep working hard, turning it over and over. Okay, so now you can see there, I've turned that over, and this is lovely mortar. It's like dairy cream. It's not too runny, it's not too stiff, it's just right. And again, that comes with practice. The more that you mix, that's perfect for laying bricks. So we're back to the wall where I removed the brick earlier on. So I'm now going to replace that brick. We've got some pre-war Cheshire Common from our good friends at Build Base Nantwich. So that is the right size brick to go in there. It's going to fit perfectly. Because these are an imperial brick, so again, for the older generation amongst us, all construction measurements were in imperial, which is feet and inches, but then obviously decimalisation came along and now everything changed to millimetres and metres, and that can be very confusing. So these are an imperial brick, so that means they're a 72mm brick. That's the height of the brick. All modern bricks now are 65mm, which if I tried to put a 65mm brick in there, it would have a massive joint around it and look shocking. So it's really important that you select the right type of brick and the right size of brick, because you want it to look right. You don't want it to look a dog's dinner, do we? So that's going to go in there. So I'll clean that out. So what I'm going to do now, and you have to be reasonably quick with this, because with these being an old common brick, they're very porous, so it takes all the moisture out of the cement and mortar really quickly. So you can't mess about with this. If you're going to take your time, then maybe you might want to make your mortar a little bit wetter. But again, going back to the mortar mixing video, you've got to be really careful with that. So I've got my bucket of cement, and I will do this quickly, but I will talk you through it afterwards. So I'm just going to use my pointing trowel just because it's easier. And I'm going to put the bed on first. So you put the mortar in there, and you're just creating a little V shape in the middle. And I'll get you a close up of this. You don't want a solid bed because you want the brick to settle into that. So once I've put that mortar joint on there, that's the bed joint. I'm now going to put the perp joints on because it'll be really difficult to push the mortar in there after. So just using the trowel, you're getting a small amount on, and I'm pushing quite hard on the brick so as it sticks. If you don't apply any pressure, it'll just fall off and you'll get a little bit frustrated. So that's the bed joint in, and like I say, we're going to have to move quick, otherwise that'll go off. So I'm going to get the brick. Now, a common mistake is you will try get the brick and you'll push it in there, it'll drop, it'll push all the mortar to the back, and you'll have nothing under the brick. and it's really frustrating, but there is a little knack that we can do. So you get your brick trowel, and you put the brick on the brick trowel, and you put it as high up as possible, and then you just slide it in, and then while supporting that, just pull the trowel out, and it's the bed's remained intact. Okay, and it's like magic, isn't it? And then I'm just going to tap that down, and I put the trowel on the top, just give it a little bit of a rock, and as long as the bottom of the brick, which we call the iris, as long as that is flush with the top of the brick that was existing, and the top of the brick is flush with the top of that brick, you know the brick's okay. You've got to be careful you don't put it on an angle. Some of these are all over the place, and that's because they've been put in ever so slightly incorrectly. So I'm just pushing that out, and that's in. Now again, the mortar is going to go off really quickly because it's a lovely sunny day. So all I'm going to do first and foremost is I'm going to get some mortar to point up, and that's a skill in itself. So as you can see here, I've got mortar on my trowel, but I've created a little ramp. Don't know if you can see that. And then you need to get the mortar on the trowel. So you do that, and as you can see, that's a lovely little pyramid shape, a little wedge shape, and that means when I push it in, I'm not going to get it on the brick. But don't be tempted, put a load on. Get a small amount at a time. So that's a small amount, and you're just tucking it into the joint without getting it on the sides of the brick. Small amounts at a time, push that in there, and then again at the bottom you're just pushing it in, you're tucking it in. Now I haven't got to do much tucking because we put the bed joint in, so the mortar already exists, but I'm just putting a little bit more on the top and down the side, and then we've got to keep an eye on that, okay, because that's going to go off really quickly, and I'll show you what we're going to do in a minute to make that look the same as everything around. So we're going to do something called a weather struck joint, which you use the trowel on an angle to create this little slanted feature, so any water runs down the brick onto the joint and off. Okay, it's important that it's tucked in, so the top is slightly recessed, the bottom is flush. I'll get a close up of this when we've finished. So I'm just going to let that go off a little bit before we worry too much about it. But obviously this is going to be the area that is quite critical because there's nothing in there, and it's our job as a bricklayer to make sure that's completely full, because then it's structurally sound. Lots of bricklayers, unfortunately, will just put a bit of mortar on the front, point it up and walk away. But we don't do that. That's not how we do it. It's got to be absolutely full, otherwise it's not going to work. So all I'm doing is the trowel is on a slight angle, it's flush on the right hand side of the brick, I'm just pulling the trowel down, and that's just making it nice and neat. Take any little of the mortar droplets off, and again I'm just tucking that in and sliding across, and then you can just pull some of the bits off and come through. A little bit of a scrape, and when that's gone off a little bit, you can make that look a little bit better, and you just get rid of all the little snots, we call it, where the mortar's just hanging. So that bit's done. You can pretty much be certain that that's okay, and we've got nothing on the face of the brick. That's the important bit. So now we've got to do the same process. So again, you create that little wedge on the trowel, and I'm making this look quite easy, I guess, by just doing that. You'll find that you'll try it and it'll fall on the floor, it'll go all over the place, you just won't get it. So it's just the hand-eye coordination. So you've got the ramp, this trowel is slightly, well, very much sticking up in the air, and I'm pushing the pointed trowel into this trowel. Push, and it should stay on like that, and because it's the lovely wedge shape, when I put it in there, I don't get nothing on the brick. Okay, and you just keep on loading your trowel and pushing that into the brick. Now again, you might think, oh look at that, it's full up already, great, I can draw me money, I can go to the client and ask for me money, it looks a really good job, everybody's happy. But once you've got the mortar into this joint and it looks full, you've then got to get your pointed trowel and you've got to push it in, and you can see that's going to the back of the brick, and you just got to keep repeating that process now until it's full. You can get a little square bar to help push it into the back, and that's always good. So you can see there now the brick's in, and I've done the weather struck pointing all the way around the joint. So hopefully when that dries, because I've used the 6:1 ratio, it should dry a similar colour to what's there. You've always got, it's a little bit of a chance you take, because you've got to use your experience to look at the colour of the mortar and decide what you think that mortar mix might be, so it does look the same. But as long as you're using your red building sand and using the right quantity of cement, it will dry a light grey. The more cement you put in, the darker the grey it'll be. You can see some of these bricks there, they're a bit, the point is not terribly good on them, but you can see how dark it is. So they've obviously used a different ratio of mortar. They've probably used a 4:1 or a 3:1, which isn't right. It could be if the rest of the wool was 3:1, but it isn't. So that's what it'll look like when you've done. So the videos that you've seen leading up to this is taking out an old brick, making it good, and that's the sort of things that we do here in construction. Have a look at the courses online. We do adult courses, weekend courses, so you can come and try this for real, and there's a list of those on the website. Okay, thank you very much.